Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inside ODOT podcast. My name is Matt Noble. I'll be your host today. In this episode, we have three excellent segments for your listening pleasure. The first one is a conversation between my fellow host, Liz McIntire, and another ODOT staffer about a recent construction conference that they attended. And the second two segments are really two halves of a whole. So the first half is audio from a video about our structural revenue issues that are affecting our delivery and operations. And the second half is a conversation between my fellow comms colleague, Anna Howe, and Assistant Director Travis Brouwer. They go into more detail about our structural revenue issues and what we're doing to hopefully correct them moving forward. They're both great segments, so you know what? Let's stop with all this intro stuff and just dive right in. Earlier this year, staff from ODOT partnered with the Oregon chapter of the American Council of Engineering Companies, or ACEC, for a partnership conference. It's something that we do with ACEC each year, and this year, my fellow host Liz McIntire was at the conference with Tana Libby-Hewlett, another communications person in the Delivery and Operations Division. Liz and Tana chat about their experience at the conference and what they learned and advice for anyone who may be thinking about attending for the first time. It's a great conversation, so I'll let Liz take it from here.
Hello, my name is Liz McIntire, and today I'm with Tana Libby-Hewlett. As the Delivery and Operations Division Training and Communications Project Manager, Tana works with trainers throughout the division to ensure quality, accessibility, and effectiveness of division training resources. Tana, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start by saying that Tana and I have been on the same team for about 3 months, and we met for the first time in person at ACEC this year. And I wanted to learn more about the event and hear more about ACEC from her perspective. So what role did you have for this year?
I was on the planning committee for this event, which includes members from both ODOT and ACEC. I was a committee member. While we were there, I moderated 2 of the breakout session rooms.
What was that experience like?
I really enjoyed getting to meet people from the consultant community and watching our ODOT coworkers come together to organize an event that would meet the needs both of ODOT coworkers and of our consultant partners.
What do you enjoy most about the event?
I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, as a state worker, I feel often insulated from the rest of the world. And in this environment, we invite the rest of the world in. So we have ACEC, our consultant partners, come in, and in this environment, we're able to meet outside of a project scope. And this additional experience can help us make the best use of public funds.
What did you learn from this event?
I think people really enjoyed the event. There were lots of members from ACEC as well as ODOT there. And people seemed really enthusiastic about the breakout sessions that we had. We worked to make sure that each of our breakout sessions had input from both ACEC and ODOT so that we could have as much combined experience as possible. And the breakout sessions that we weren't able to have that happen on were our least attended sessions. The thing that really spoke to me was people are looking for that kind of combined understanding, that combined knowledge.
What do you hope that others learned at this event?
Hopefully others learned that same lesson and they were able to see that same partnership taking place and that events like this can help us get there. So if all of us are helping each other go towards that same goal, we will get there in a better way.
Do you have any advice for people that are attending the event for the first time? Or maybe last year I felt like I didn't really get the experience that I wanted. Do you have any advice for those folks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say reach out to the committee who's planning, and we would love to be able to fill in any blanks. All of the information is up on the website as early as we have it. And so any questions about that and how you can engage in that, I would say we could also provide ability to make connections with people who are either in your area or in the specific line of work that you're doing.
That's a really great resource.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We're working with consultants everywhere, and we're working with ODOT regions everywhere. There's ways to make connections in all different ways. ODOT has a LinkedIn, and you can find ODOT coworkers connected to that. And many of those people were there at the event. Sharing those things that way and being able to connect and network that way is another resource as well.
What are you looking forward to next year?
We're hoping to build on the success of this year. Things went really fluidly this year. The panels were really well attended. So hoping to have more of those interactive panels, giving those perspectives of maybe the reasoning why ODOT is doing the things they're doing and feedback from consultants on how those are going from the consultant side, and then making it bigger and better. We had quite a lot of people that were not able to attend this year and signed up late or weren't able to sign up. So maybe hoping to get people signing up earlier next year would be great as well.
So is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to include?
I love this event, and I think it is a wonderful way for ODOTians to connect with people outside of ODOT. Excited for all the people who do get to come to it. I know it's not something that everyone gets to go to, so making sure that you do ask your supervisor if you can go to this, and hoping that everyone gets the chance to go at some point, because I do think it's a valuable resource that we offer.
So as I said at the top of the show, our next two segments are really two halves of one whole. The first segment is actually audio from a video that we produced in January of this year called Why Transportation Agencies Are Cutting Maintenance. The video is about 5 minutes long, and it is a simpler, more plain language explanation about our structural revenue issues and why we're having trouble funding our maintenance and operations activities. Like I said, it's kind of a complicated issue, but this video does a very good job of breaking it down for the average person, and we're playing it for you as a way to set up our next interview segment that will follow the video audio. The interview is a conversation between Anna Howe, one of our communications folks, and Travis Brouwer, who is our Assistant Director for Revenue and Finance. Anna and Travis go into more detail about those structural revenue issues and, most importantly, what we're doing to fix them and how we're working with the state legislature and the governor's office ahead of the 2025 legislative session to ensure that everyone involved, especially the decision makers, understand our issues and some of the options on the table to fix them. It's an excellent and illuminating conversation, so you will hear that after the audio from the video.
Maintaining our transportation system, whether that's fixing potholes, plowing snow, or helping stranded travelers, is something most people can agree the government should do. But governments across the U.S. are cutting back on maintenance. Why is that? You have to go back to when the modern transportation system was first built. At the turn of the 20th century, the public demanded a new network of roads that would allow them to travel with ease and speed. Governments faced a problem: how to pay for it. In 1919, Oregon paved the way by adopting the country's first gas tax. After that, virtually every transportation agency across the country adopted one too. In Oregon, gas tax receipts are combined with fees on vehicles and freight haulers to form the State Highway Fund. That fund then distributes money to transportation agencies across the state. For decades, the gas tax worked great. With it, Oregon built tens of thousands of miles of roads and thousands of bridges. It funded the construction of bike lanes, sidewalks, stoplights, and guardrails. But the gas tax is starting to show its age in two different ways. First, vehicles have gotten more fuel efficient. The average new passenger vehicle sold today uses 25% less gas than 20 years ago. By 2035, 100% of new vehicles sold in Oregon will be electric. The switch to EVs is driving carbon emissions from transportation down 60% over the next 25 years. But no matter how little gas they use, vehicles still wear down the road. Second, the gas tax has had a rough time keeping up with inflation. The federal gas tax hasn't increased since 1993. And unlike 19 other states, Oregon's gas tax isn't pegged to inflation, the price of fuel, or fuel economy. With every year that passes, the same dollar gets you less and less. The impact of inflation doesn't end with the gas tax itself. Since 2019, steel has gone up by 75%, concrete by 32%, and asphalt by 39%. So what happens when available funding can't keep pace with increasing costs? Tough choices have to be made. Which brings us to what's happening today. Transportation agencies everywhere are cutting their maintenance budgets. As maintenance gets cut, Oregon's transportation system is getting more vulnerable to natural disasters. Without crews to clear culverts or trim hazardous trees or plow snow, roads are staying closed longer after storms. The system is getting dirtier, with crews unable to keep up with growing volumes of trash and graffiti, or restore campsites as quickly as they used to. Without sufficient staffing, incident response teams are slower to the scene to clear crashes, support first responders, and get traffic moving again. Travelers are facing slower and more dangerous travel in winter conditions. Roads are getting rougher, with conditions getting bad enough that agencies are lowering speed limits to give people more time to navigate safely. Customer service is declining. As DMV staffing gets cut, people will wait longer for help. The decline in our transportation system won't be limited to state highways. It will happen to local and neighborhood roads, sidewalks, and bike lanes too. Rural and urban areas are struggling with these cuts. Transportation agencies can't cut their way out of the problem because the problem is a permanent decline in revenue. Okay, so let's take a look at what we can do about this as a state. Unfortunately, 3 big sources of funding are off the table. Federal funding can't be used for maintenance. Money collected from tolls can be used to maintain the toll road, but it can't be directed to statewide maintenance. Lastly, funding dedicated to projects by state law, which makes up a large percentage of ODOT's budget, can't be directed to statewide maintenance without legislative action. Of all the state funding available to ODOT, less than 10% can be used for maintenance services. But the good news is that there are lots of different ways to fund a safe and efficient transportation system. One option would be to expand Oregon's existing pay-per-mile or road usage charge program. It's a modern-day take on the gas tax, in that the more you drive on the road, the more you pay to maintain and improve it. The state could also raise revenue through registration or other vehicle fees, or it could fill the gap with general fund resources. While the gas tax won't last forever, a gas tax increase could cover the costs of maintaining the system in the near term, while we work out how to fund it in the long term. And lastly, indexing these fees to inflation would make sure the system stays funded long into the future. With tough choices ahead, Oregonians will need to decide how much they want to maintain their transportation system and how best to pay for it.
My name is Howe, and I work on the communications team. I'm here today on Teams with Travis Brouwer, ODOT's Assistant Director of Revenue and Finance. We're here today to talk about our structural funding challenges and what the agency is doing to work with the governor and the legislature to resolve some of those challenges. Hi, Travis. How are you doing?
Hi, Anna. I'm doing great. Glad to have the opportunity to talk to you about this today.
So we've been hearing a lot for a couple years now about our funding challenges, but now it seems to be really in the spotlight, really front and center for the legislature, for the governor, for the agency. It's our top priority to really address these funding challenges so we can avert the worst case scenarios. When you're at a barbecue or a family event, how do you explain this to your friends and family?
You know, Anna, it's sad, but I do talk about this a lot with friends and family, and they're probably sick of hearing me talk about it. But at the same time, I think it's really important for all of us to be ambassadors to talk about the challenges we have with the transportation system in Oregon and elsewhere too. So, typically what I explain is that as with lots of other transportation agencies across the country, the funding sources that we rely on are basically flat. The gas tax, everybody recognizes, is being eroded by more and more efficient vehicles. And a lot of our other funding sources just aren't keeping up with inflation. So while our funding is flat, our costs are growing, and people see that in their daily lives, so they understand it. So I think it's actually relatively easy for people to understand. You see that light bulb going off over people's heads as they oftentimes on their own ask the question, what are you guys going to do to keep our roads in good shape as we get more electric vehicles on the road, as we get more efficient vehicles on the road? What are you going to do to take the place of the gas tax? And so I think people actually come to this on their own. They ask the question and they're receptive to the response and understand the challenges that we face.
It is never all that fun to talk about work at social functions, but it is important, as you said, for all of us to be ambassadors to this message, and so that we can really increase people's awareness of what's going on, especially since we're all Oregon residents and taxpayers ourselves, and so our families and friends. So I think that's really helpful. What are some common misconceptions you hear out in the public about our funding or our budget?
I think the biggest thing that people don't understand is that we really have two almost separate budgets. We called it a tale of two budgets. In one of those areas, in the construction arena, it really has been the best of times. We've got a lot of money coming in from the HB 2017 funds and the federal government that have allowed us to do a lot of work. So people see that work out on the road, us reconstructing interchanges, paving highways, building new bike lanes and sidewalks. And so they wonder, well, how is it you don't have any money? The reality is it's that other side of the budget, the operations of the agency and maintaining our roads, where we have the shortfall, where it is the worst of times in recent years. And so it's just being able to explain to people that while we may have a $6 billion biennial budget, so much of that is dedicated by federal law and by state law to building and constructing projects, and that it doesn't leave us a whole heck of a lot left to be able to do that day-to-day work of road maintenance that is so important to keeping the road safe and open to traffic, and just being able to run the agency, serve the Oregonians' needs that we have.
And so when you talk about this with other employees, with people outside the agency, what are some of the common questions that you're getting?
I think the main one is, how is it that with a budget as big as yours, you don't have enough money to plow the roads? We explain how we can only use a subset of our budget. It's, about 20% of the total state highway fund and about 10% of the total agency budget is available to us to do that day-to-day maintenance of the roads and to operate the agency. So I think that is helpful when we kind of walk through that systematically, particularly with legislators. And we've had those conversations. They understand that the choices that the federal government makes and how they send us money, the choices that the legislature has made over the course of the last 23 years has really put some constraints in what we as an agency can do to invest in just day-to-day highway maintenance.
You talked about the effects of the gas tax and sort of these traditional funding streams that we've relied on not keeping up with our needs. And day to day, all of us are feeling the effects of inflation. Mm-hmm. How does inflation and sort of increased costs in the construction world and just for materials play into this funding challenge that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, construction cost increase have been a big deal for us over the last couple of years. I regularly track the National Highway Construction Cost Index that the Federal Highway Administration puts out. And the last time they updated that, it showed that from the beginning of 2017 to the end of 2023, construction costs across the country for highway projects about doubled. For context, during that same time, the state highway fund, because of HB 2017, went up by about 40%. So even with that massive infusion of additional resources from HB 2017, our actual construction budget lost ground in terms of how much we can buy for the dollars we have available. And of course, on the maintenance side, we rely on many of the same commodities that have gone up in price. We see our asphalt prices are up, our fuel prices are up. We use a lot of fuel to keep our fleet out there on the road. And also those vehicles in our fleet, the cost has gone up immensely. So all of those areas are things that have gotten much more expensive for us. And so the same dollar just doesn't buy as much as it used to. The challenge, of course, is that our funding sources aren't adjusted with inflation. Just about every other tax that you pay goes up as prices go up. Sales taxes go up as prices go up. Property taxes go up as property values increase. And income taxes go up as incomes generally increase. all of our transportation taxes, the gas tax, DMV fees, the weight mile tax on heavy trucks, all those are pegged at a flat rate, and they don't adjust with prices unless, of course, the legislature goes in and manually adjusts them. We've seen more and more states across the country. I think there are 24 states in the District of Columbia now that have somehow pegged their gas tax to the price of fuel or overall cost. And that has allowed them to rise over time with inflation in a way ours hasn't. If our gas tax had been adjusted for inflation since 1993, one of the times the legislature raised it for a long hiatus, it would have to be about 60 cents a gallon now. It's only 40. So over that last 30 years, we've essentially lost a third of our purchasing power in the gas tax.
Besides the gas tax, what are some other alternative funding sources that other states use that we could potentially use here in Oregon? And what are we putting forth in front of the legislature as an option for them to pursue?
Right now, I think everything is on the table, and the legislature is very receptive to looking at different ways of doing things. So when we have conversations with the legislature, I use basically a three-word mantra, which is increase, index, and diversify. Most of our taxes and fees now are ripe for an increase to be able to keep up with past inflation, to be able to adjust them for the cost increases we've already seen. So we likely need to increase many of our taxes and fees, DMV fees, for example, the gas tax, and others as well, just to make up for lost ground. Second, we're going to need to look at indexing some or all of these sources like other states have done. We had a conversation recently with Utah, which has now indexed most of their transportation funding sources to inflation, and that will help them keep up over time. And then we need to diversify, and that's going to be looking at a wide range of other options. One of the things that has come up pretty extensively is a road usage charge, which could be a replacement for the gas tax, which could supplement the gas tax as a way to charge people by the mile for their use of the roads, to make sure everybody's paying their fair share for driving on the roads, regardless of what fuel type you're using. I've always said that as the transportation system shifts away from burning fossil fuels as the main way to power our vehicles, we're going to need to shift away from taxes on fossil fuels as the main way we pay for transportation. That is the only way that we're going to have sustainable transportation funding as we make the transportation system more sustainable. So you're going to hear us talk a lot about road usage charging, but that's not the only thing. There are going to be other conversations. We've had legislators ask about whether there should be retail delivery fees. That's something a number of other states have done that have brought in some additional revenue. And I think people are going to be looking at, whether there are other vehicle use or ownership fees that could be created or raised, in the case some of them we have in place, to help pay for the transportation system.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of options out there and that the legislature is really engaged in this with us. They're really asking a lot of good questions. They're really wanting to help us solve this. So that's really what we're gearing up towards with the 2025 legislative session, our hopes of passing a transportation funding package. We have the governor's support going into next year. And we have the statewide transportation tour that we are working on with the Oregon legislature right now. Outside of all of that, what is really giving you hope when you look to the near future, considering this is a pretty dire situation if we do nothing?
It is dire if the legislature does nothing, but I am hopeful and optimistic that the message that we have been laying out over the last 4 years has really sunk in. I mean, we've been in front of the legislature many times, talked with the media, talked with our stakeholder groups, talked with the public, and I think people are really getting that there is a major challenge. We have supporting messaging from local governments that are in a very similar state. They are facing challenges paying for their basic road maintenance and operations as well. So I'm optimistic that we are seeing legislators on both sides of the aisle, in both chambers, and folks in both the legislature and the governor really stepping forward to say that transportation is going to be a priority, if not the priority, for the 2025 legislative session. In fact, I had a reporter call up a few weeks ago and say, I feel like I really need to dive into transportation because everybody's telling me that it's going to be the big issue for 2025. So what can you tell me about how we fund Oregon's transportation system? And of course, I took that opportunity. And I think it's really indicative of the fact that everybody's engaged and recognizes this needs to be a priority, not just for ODOT, but for the whole state.
And that's largely because transportation really affects everyone in Oregon. So it's not just us, it's a whole statewide issue that we really need to resolve. So we're excited to do so. And just in case people don't know, why do we need the legislature to help us with this?
As a state agency, we are a creature of the laws that are passed. We cannot do things that are outside of our statutory authority. And even more importantly, it really is up to the legislature to determine the rates that are set in statute for each of the taxes and fees that helps fund transportation in Oregon. They also set our budget down to the division level and including the number of positions that we have within the agency. So we are really able to do nothing without the legislature's direction in statute and their approval of increased revenue. There is almost no tax or fee in any state that is simply set by an agency. So that is really the reality, that we need to have the legislature's support and approval for all of those taxes and fees.
Earlier this year, the governor did ask us to pause our efforts on tolling. How is that connected to what we're looking for in the future? And will tolling be a part of that conversation?
So tolling is really a tool that's used to pay for projects. And so we were not going to be relying on toll revenue to pay for agency operations and maintenance. So there's been some who have said, well, the loss of tolling is really going to impact your maintenance problem and make it worse. The reality is that it really doesn't. So there's just a little bit of money from tolling that was going to go to pay for maintaining the roads that were being tolled. But really, that is a separate and distinct problem. Now, it's going to cause us some challenges in the future. Frankly, I don't know how we would build the interstate bridge without tolling. I don't know how we will pay for other major transportation projects across the state, particularly those major bridge rehabilitation and replacement projects that we know we're going to need in the future. So I think legislators are going to look for other options, but in the end, they may turn again to tolling as they need to fund major projects. That's why tolling was directed in HB 2017. The legislature looked at how much money they could raise from taxes and realized there was still a pretty big delta from what the needs were in order to tackle congestion in the Portland metro region and also to help manage demand across the system.
Thank you for that. I know that that's on some people's mind just as it was big news earlier this year. My last question is a fun one. If you had to come up with a Lord of the Rings analogy for what we're facing and doing right now, what would that be?
Well, I have been known to be a bit of a Lord of the Rings fan, and I actually do take some comfort from the Lord of the Rings. I read the series to my youngest daughter a couple of years ago, and I remember there were a number of times throughout the books when things looked very dark, when it looked as though evil would triumph and that good would be vanquished from Middle-earth. And I will tell you that there were times in those books that there were messages of hope, that even though it looks dark, good will always triumph. And I think that's where we are as an agency. Right now, things look a little bit dark. I see on the horizon, the darkness is breaking. Storm clouds are being pushed back. In the end, I think we will triumph.
I love it. Thank you. I have always found a lot of hope in Lord of the Rings as well. So thanks for entertaining that. Okay. Thank you so much, Travis, for taking the time today and breaking this down with us. And we will talk again soon, I'm sure.
All right, that about does it for the Inside ODOT podcast, episode 12. We hope you guys enjoyed what you heard, maybe had some laughs, learned a few things. And if you have any feedback or comments for us, please send those to the Inside ODOT email account. And we'd love to hear from listeners like you. But let's wrap up the show. So once again, thank you for listening, and we will see you next month for episode 13. Take care.